Surprise! John was home for the first time in 2 years, visiting the folks for Canadian Thanksgiving. And, as it was a lovely fall evening, with a ripe full harvest moon, he decided to go for a walk to burn off some of that turkey and stuffing. Without thinking about where he was going, or where he might end up, John found himself in what passed for the local downtown. Of course, everything was closed. They'd rolled up the sidewalks at 6 p.m. back when he was a kid, and it didn't look like anything had changed. So rather than walk through the deserted canyon that was the Lakeshore Road, John decided to head for the park and walk out to the lighthouse at the end of the pier, which jutted out into the lake. The lake, the huge body of water which dominated both the town and John's youth. John had spent countless hours by the shore or sitting in Lakeside Park, watching and listening to the waves crash against the rocky shore. But John's favorite place to sit and think, or at least daydream, was the base of the lighthouse at the end of the pier. As John made his way along Navy Street through the oldest section of town, the original town from the 1800s, he noticed the silence. He didn't see or encounter anyone or see any lights in the windows of the old houses. He couldn't even hear the lake. He first saw the girl, the young woman, in Lakeside Park, sitting on a bench looking out over the broad expanse of water. He couldn't tell much about her, other than she had long black hair and was wearing a skirt. Another lost and lonely soul, seeking solace in contemplation of the eternal lake, John thought. Just like me during the barren years of my youth. Wonder who she is. John felt a wave of bittersweet nostalgia wash over him, and then he continued on down to the pier. The pier jutted some 400 feet into the dark waters of the lake, the light of the full harvest moon creating a sparkling path across the waves, a path leading to infinity, a stairway to heaven. In the silence, broken only by the slap of John's shoes, John found himself humming. And he made himself stop. I must have a bustle in my hedgerow, he told himself. A moment later, John reached the end of the pier and was surprised to see another young woman sitting at the base of the lighthouse. A woman wearing a skirt with long black hair. Was it the same woman who had been sitting on the bench in the park? But how could that be? She would have had to walk past him to reach the end of the pier, and that hadn't happened. Still, she certainly looked like the girl in the park. Hello? John said, rather tentatively. The young woman raised her head, and John could see her face clearly in the silvery moonlight. She was attractive, not. Her face was thin, pinched, acne-scarred, and looked dirty. Seen up close, the long black hair was tangled and unkempt, her eyes red and glowing. Yet she was smiling. But it was not a nice smile. Suddenly, John heard a gentle plop, and then, to his utter horror, the young woman's head detached from the trunk of her body and rose several feet into the night air. Then the young woman, the head, opened its mouth, displaying its crooked yellow teeth, and laughed, a sound between a shriek and a cackle, before screaming, "Surprise!" And then the head flew away, circling the top of the lighthouse, before flying off into the night sky, leaving the headless body behind. Said headless body then stood up and took a step towards John, who ran. She was a night floater. What is a night floater? Floating heads, aka night floaters, or floaters, were the boogie people of John's misspent youth. The name referred to the ability of certain individuals to detach their heads from the trunks of their bodies, the heads then being able to fly or float at will. They were said to attack unsuspecting victims, biting them and sometimes even killing them. They were also said to be able to animate their headless bodies to chase and strangle victims. The town was supposed to be home to a cult or coven of these evil people, according to the whispered stream of local gossip. But John had never encountered a night floater, or knew anyone who had, so he'd come to regard the whole thing as an urban legend. Till now. Now he knew the night floaters were real. It was 2 miles to John's parents', and he ran all the way, bursting into the dining room. Where they were all still sitting around the table, in the same spots they were an hour ago, when he'd left on his walk. "Why, whatever is wrong, John?" his mother crooned. "You look like you'd seen a ghost." Gasping for breath, John told them what happened, concluding with a choked, "The night floaters are real." "Why, of course they are, dear," his mother answered quietly. "What?" And then John watched in total astonishment as, with a plop, John's mother detached her head from the trunk of her body. And then John's dad, then John's sister and the sister's husband, and his brother and the brother's girlfriend, all detached their heads, so that all of their heads, mom, dad, sis, hubby, bro, girlfriend, all of them floated above the Thanksgiving table, staring at John before saying in unison, "Surprise!" John collapsed into a chair, and as he landed, he felt a wrenching sensation at the base of his neck, then heard a loud plop. And then John, too, found his head floating 3 feet above the table. "If you're finally ready, John," his mother said, "let's go visit the neighbors. I'm sure they'll be surprised." The moral of the story? Not all surprises are happy, but there's no use screaming your head off over it. Wow, for a moment there, I almost screamed my head off. If this is your first visit to my channel, please consider subscribing. My name is Warren, and I write and tell original ghost stories and original horror stories featuring such cryptids as the night floaters, werewolves, and the black-eyed children. So again, please consider subscribing. Please help me to reach my goal of 2,500 subs. Till midnight. Cheers. Video used in today's presentation, courtesy of Dr. Curious, while the music was the Hammer-esque Unseen Horrors by that patron of the internet, Kevin MacLeod.